In progress.
Welcome again to everyone to the Brown Bag today with Idaho Power. Just a few things, housekeeping for folks. Number one, we are being recorded. So if that's an issue for you, it might be something you want to think about. The second housekeeping is the chat box. So please jump into that chat box and throw your name in and chat with someone you might know here or chat with all of us. We'll be using the chat box for questions, and we'll have questions at the end of the presentation today. So we'll take a couple minutes here and let everyone jump into our meeting, and then we'll get started pretty quickly. Just a reminder that the Boise River Enhancement Network is open to anyone for membership. Membership is free. And we really encourage you to visit our website, boiseriverinhancement.org. We're also on Facebook. And of course, membership is free, but we always appreciate any sort of donation that anyone would like to make for us. And all of that can be handled on our website. So the Boise River Enhancement Network, for those unfamiliar with our organization, is a network of people who live, work, and play in the Boise River watershed and are dedicated to promoting the ecological enhancement of the river. We are a network of professionals, government agencies, private industry, citizen scientists, and just people on the street who are interested in learning and contributing to the ecological health of the river. Our presentation today is by Russ Weedon of Idaho Power, and he will be introduced today by Louisa Evers, who is a member of the Boise River Enhancement Network. She serves on our coordinating team and is also a member of the outreach committee, which set up this presentation today. So Louisa, if you could take it away, and we can get Russ rolling today.
Okie dokie, welcome everyone. Our speaker today is Russ Weedon, as mentioned, from Idaho Power. Russ is the Education and Outreach Energy Advisor for Idaho Power. He's worked for the company for 31 years, with the last 22 years in the role of Community Education and Outreach. Russ has a bachelor's in communications from Boise State and a master's in organizational leadership from George Fox University. He has also completed some doctoral studies in organizational psychology from University of Idaho and North Central University. Russ has also served as adjunct faculty at George Fox, and the College of Western Idaho. His other activities include volunteering for Junior Achievement and serving on the Junior Achievement of Treasure Valley Board, volunteering for Business Professionals of America and serving on their state board, membership in the Capital City Kiwanis Club, and if that weren't enough, he has also started a voiceover business for audiobooks, radio spots, short feature videos, and corporate training videos. Russ is married to Beth, has an adult daughter, Madison, and 4 stepchildren ranging in age from 11 to 19, and a dog named Max. So Russ, welcome.
Thank you, Louisa. I appreciate that, and Maria as well. Hearing my voice this morning, you probably wouldn't think I should be going into voiceover business, but I'm fighting a little bit of a cold. So my apologies if my voice kind of cracks a little bit this afternoon, but I am very, very pleased to be with you all. I see some familiar names on the list here. So good to be with all of you, and some good friends out there in the audience. So it's a privilege to be with all of you. And, thinking about being with Idaho Power for 31 years, I'm going to try to share my screen here real fast. I think back on those 31 years, and I'm just so proud of what Idaho Power has done over the years in terms of environmental stewardship and our participation in a lot of different programs, our Snake River Stewardship Program, wildlife habitat restoration. I'll get into all of this, but it's just been a privilege to see what Idaho Power has done through the years and just continues to do as well. Let me just double check here. Let me see if I can get my PowerPoint to come up for us. There we go. Can maybe Gary, could you give me a thumbs up if you're seeing my PowerPoint okay? Since I can see your handsome face. Thank you, sir. We got a thumbs up. I appreciate that. All right, well, so what Louisa and Maria asked me to do this afternoon is just share with you. I know that there may be a little departure here because Idaho Power obviously operates on the Snake River and its tributaries, but of course the Boise River is a big part of that. The entire river system is a big part of that. So what I would like to do is start with some of our environmental stewardship programs and then just really delve into what we're doing on the river and within the tributaries in terms of restoration and conservation as well. If you don't mind, I want to share just a little bit of Idaho Power's history, a little bit of background, because I think it's important to know where we came from, to kind of know where we're going forward. Many of you probably know the history of Idaho Power. We started as a company in 1916, so we've been around for quite a while. Those photos that are popping up on the screen there for you, hopefully, are the early construction photos of the very first dam that was built in Idaho and in the big part of the Northwest that was not only for irrigation, but was also for generating electricity. And that's our little Swan Falls Dam just south of Kuna there that many of you are very familiar with. Swan Falls was built somewhere between 1907, 1909, somewhere in that area, based on the historical records. But you think back to those times, and who were the people that lived and settled here in Idaho? Well, they were the farmers and the ranchers, and of course the silver miners, silver mining being a booming industry back then. But of course they were still living in a very high desert, and so very hot, very arid. And so they were trying to find water. They wanted to get water into these valleys so they could begin irrigating and raising crops and livestock. So they started building these dams, and many of them were just right in succession from 1905 right through into the 1960s. Now, of course, they were building dams, just different groups of farmers and ranchers were building those dams on the Snake River, but they finally got together and they said, well, why don't we consolidate? Why don't we build a company and start selling electricity to all the people that are moving into our state? So as many of you know, and I mentioned just this earlier, just a second ago, Idaho Power opened its doors in 1916. That, by the way, many of you may have seen that historical photo. That is at the corner of 12th and Main Street in downtown Boise. And you can see some of the historical iconic things that are still around today. For instance, many of you recognize the iconic spires of the Idaho Hotel, the Owyhee Plaza Hotel, and even the trolley system that is no longer there. If you see at the very back of the photo, there's a little trolley car that used to be running in downtown Boise. But that's the day Idaho Power opened its doors to, believe it or not, 18,000 customers, which is kind of a really cool thing if you think about it. Any business that opens its doors for the very first day and they automatically have customers. Well, as you can imagine, those customers were the builders of the company. They were the farmers, ranchers, and miners and other industries, the loggers that were starting to come into Idaho. So instant customers and instant company right out of the gate. But of course, things have changed a little bit. But things have changed and stayed the same as well. Here's modern day downtown Boise, same corner. The Idaho Hotel still sits there, as it does the Owyhee Plaza. A few things have had a facelift. Of course, we don't see the trolley car anymore. It'd be nice to have that back. But today, things have been very, very different. And let's go back to those dams, because from Swan Falls to the Hells Canyon complex from 1905 to about 1962, 65, 17 dams were built on the Snake River and its tributaries to provide electricity for the ever-growing state of Idaho. But we did reach a point, or the company reached a point, where water could no longer provide electricity for all of the people moving into our region. And by the way, those little darker colored, those gray areas, that is Idaho Power's service territory. For those of you not in the audience, not familiar with Idaho Power or our territory, some people hear the word or hear the company name Idaho Power and they think we provide electricity to the entire state, which would kind of make sense. But as you can see, our region is down mostly in the southern part of Idaho, a little bit of a stretch up here in the Chalice, Stanley, Salmon area, and even a few customers over in eastern Oregon. So Ontario, Nissa, Vail, those customers over there. But as I was mentioning, we reached a point probably in the 1970s where water could no longer provide everybody's electricity in our territory. So we brought on a few other, excuse me, a couple of other natural resources. Coal was the big one, of course, and coal has been in place for 60 some years now. And so for many years, Idaho Power, in co-ownership with other sister utilities in the West and the Pacific Northwest, we have co-owned and operated 3 coal plants. And I know you're probably only seeing 2, and that would be our North Valmy plant in northern Nevada, and then the big Jim Bridger plant in Rock Springs, Wyoming. There was, up until very recently, a plant here in Boardman, Oregon. That plant has been shut down. It is no longer operating, and that I'll get to why that is here in a few minutes. Some of you probably already know the answer to it, but it has a lot to do, or it has specifically to do with Idaho Power's recent clean energy goal. I'll get to that in just a few minutes. Then, of course, we have natural gas in place as well. Our 2 smaller ones over in the Mountain Home area that were originally built as peaker plants, in other words, during the summer peak hours and days when temperatures are hitting triple digits, those were fired up to provide a little extra boost in electricity for us, but they're in full operation now. And then our Langley Gulch plant, the newest of all of them, came online in 2012. It's a big one over in the New Plymouth area. It gives us quite a bit, about 300 megawatts of power. And then you're probably seeing our little diesel plant up there in the Salmon area. That just gives those folks, again, another little extra boost of power, especially in the wintertime when they need it the most. So having said all of this, many of you are probably sitting here going, wait a minute, I know Idaho Power is involved in wind and solar and geothermal and all kinds of cool renewable stuff. That is true. So how does that play a part in the picture? Well, let's kind of get to that. Oh, by the way, we now, instead of the 18,000 customers that we started with, we are now just over about 2 months ago, we eclipsed the 600,000 customer mark. And by the way, those are across all customer classes. That's residential, that's small and large commercial, industrial customers. In fact, Micron by far is our largest customer. And then all of those wonderful ag folks out there needing lots of electricity in the summertime. So it does span all customer classes. So here's how it looks today. Excuse me. Every year, of course, all public utilities, we kind of throw everything into a big pot and say, okay, what did we use this year to generate everybody's electricity? Now, the good news is every year, hydroelectricity is still very prominent. It truly is our core. It's our foundation. It always has been, and hopefully it always will be. The percentages vary, of course, from year to year. But last year, about 42% of our energy came from hydropower. But as you can see, coal and natural gas still play a big part in this picture. You may wonder, what are market purchases? Many of you know the answer to this. Years and years ago, power companies across the United States, they actually created major grids. There are 3 major interconnect grids across the country. Idaho Power is part of the Western Interconnect Grid. This allows us to buy and sell energy to one another depending on the wholesale price from day to day. So we actually have energy traders that go out onto the market, and if they find some cheap hydropower out there or find some solar power that's even cheaper than what we've got on the market today, they'll go out and purchase those things as well. So if you think about it, it actually balances the system, makes the system more reliable because we're sharing electricity with one another. So even though we can't account for natural disasters like wildfires and hurricanes and tornadoes and things like that, it does keep the system more reliable, so we don't have to worry so much about big power deficits and possible power outages or rolling blackouts and that sort of thing. So here's the big picture. It seems like a small picture, but it's growing rapidly. Solar, wind, geothermal, biomass, these are the pieces of the pie that are growing dramatically as we start to phase out coal, especially. And I'll get to that in just a second. But before I do, let me show you a comparison, Idaho Power to the rest of the United States. Clearly, our renewable portfolio, or a piece of our portfolio, over 60% of our stuff is renewable. But compare us to the rest of the United States collectively, they still struggle collectively trying to produce more renewable energy, more clean energy, if you will. very dependent still on coal and natural gas, nuclear power, of course. And so you don't see a lot of hydro, you don't see a lot of non-hydro renewables across the United States. It's happening, there's no doubt about it, but you can definitely see some big differences between us and the rest of the world, if you will. All right, well, this is all leading up to what I was trying to get to. In 2019, Idaho Power, we thought we were finally in a good position to come out publicly to our shareholders, our customers, the general public, the media, and we came out with this very, very aggressive and very bold goal, if you will. We said that by the year 2045, we wanted to be providing all of our customers 100% clean energy. That is a very ambitious goal, as you can imagine. We're not the only utility out there doing it. Some utilities have more aggressive goals. They want to be clean by 2035. Some are waiting until 2050. It doesn't really matter. But what really matters is what is clean energy? I think we all know clean energy, you could define it by saying it's renewable. There's no doubt about it. But clean goes to the next level. We all know, right? Clean means no carbon emissions. We want to lower our carbon footprint to absolute zero in the next 24, 25 years. And so you're all sitting here going, okay, I know what Idaho Power has to do. The first move we have to make, and we are already starting to make that move, is to shut down the coal plants. That's why the one in Boardman, Oregon, earlier in that map, is no longer there. About a year and a half ago, the Boardman plant was completely shut down. And if any of you are interested, I could provide you with a link to our brand new integrated resource plan that shows a very detailed account of how we are going to exit out of the other two plants by the year 2028. That's what we're hoping right now. Things change, of course, and it changed just this last year because of a low snow pack and low water year for 2021. So all of this is varied by Mother Nature, of course, as we know. So hopefully that's a kind of a really quick background, quick history about where Idaho Power is and where we stand in the market and in the industry in terms of moving toward more clean resources. And so this is why you're seeing more solar being built out here and more windmills being put up all over the place. That, of course, those assets don't belong to Idaho Power, but we're purchasing the energy from the independent developers that are coming into our service territory. Let me just stop for a moment and get a cup of, or a drink of coffee real fast. Let me read that question really fast in the chat. Does the Idaho National Lab create nuclear energy for the grid separate from Idaho Power? On the slide with the comparison of where our power, the INL, they are sort of an independent, they're not even in our service territory, not that that would matter. But yes, you all probably know the fact that we're moving from nuclear fission to fusion. It's safer, it's less volatile, and the INL is definitely heavily involved in that. So to your point, Idaho Power certainly isn't taking nuclear energy off the table completely. In fact, presently, some of the purchases of power that we're making in the Pacific Northwest, especially in the Seattle, Washington area, is nuclear power. So it is part of our mix. It's just not part of what Idaho Power is. It's not part of our actual physical assets. That's a great question, though. Nuclear power is still out there, still very popular, still a big producer of energy. And it is a clean resource, which surprises a lot of people when you ask people, is it a clean resource? And most people say no, but it truly is, because there are no carbon emissions involved there. Good stuff, yeah. Why will it take until 2045? Good question, because obviously as you're decreasing something like coal, these are huge producers of power for Idaho Power, as you're decreasing those and winding down out of those, you have to have something in place to compensate. So we're very well aware that we can't just shut these things off and then have energy available to everybody. It's going to take a little bit of time. And one thing that hasn't even been discussed yet is battery storage. We are anticipating in the next 10, 15, 20 years that full-scale, utility-scale battery storage, the Teslas, the General Electrics, companies out of Japan, they are going to have in place, and they already are, it's just not global just yet. They will have utility-scale battery storage available for us so that we can start storing energy And so we will have energy for peak hours and peak days and peak months available and ready for us. It's down the road a little ways. The technology hasn't quite caught up with the need, but we're getting there. Excellent question. Why will it take so long? Yeah, good stuff. All right, well, the big reason I was asked to speak to you today is, what is Idaho Power doing with the Snake River? How are we taking care of this wonderful resource that we all enjoy? Well, there's no doubt about it. I mentioned this right at the top that I know I work for Idaho Power and have been there forever, but we take a lot of pride in the fact that we are very responsible for the river and its tributaries, the wildlife, the riparian areas, the terrestrial areas, and that sort of thing. Let me just really quickly say, has Idaho Power considered ways to finance placing solar on the roofs of their customers? What Idaho Power has chosen to not be a player, so to speak. We're not selling solar. We're not involved in the marketing of it. We're not against it in any way. In fact, we're very glad to see that people want to generate their own clean, renewable energy. And so we are definitely advocates for people putting solar, rooftop solar, windmills, whatever they, all we ask of our customers is to do a lot of research. I mean, crunch the numbers. There are some outfits out there that are not really giving customers the full picture of how much the cost is going to be and what the payoff is going to be. And so we're just making sure people are paying attention and really crunching the numbers. And we have energy advisors that will talk to people and say, okay, well, here's how much it's going to cost you. Here's the payback. Here's how much it will take to pay this back. So we're just trying to make sure that people are educated about solar. But it is a really good alternative for people, no doubt about it. All right. Well, what is environmental stewardship for Idaho Power? This is actually in a lot of our documents from our policy handbooks, right on our mission statement. Our business and our customers depend on natural resources and to be shared and sustained for future generations. We accept and embrace our responsibility to demonstrate leadership in environmental compliance and conservation of our shared resources. Now, let me go back to the word compliance. I think we're all aware of the fact that Idaho Power is a regulated regulated company in a regulated industry. We answer to the Public Utilities Commission, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And so we do have to comply with state and federal rules and laws about how we take care of the natural resources out there. And of course, we are in the process of relicensing all of our hydro projects. It's kind of like relicensing a car. Every 35 to 50 years, you have to relicense these projects. Well, you do have to comply with some of the mandates, with some of the things that all the governments and some of the other stakeholder groups are out there saying you must do in order to get your license. So yeah, there could be an argument that says Idaho Power only does these things to stay in compliance so they can get their licenses back. But once again, one of the things I'm so proud of with Idaho Power is I believe, and I think we all would agree, that Idaho Power goes way above and beyond just the compliance issues. All right. So what are some of the things that are going on? We obviously will not have time to get to all of this stuff. In fact, some of this may not be as pertinent today as we need it to be, but we'll talk a little bit about our fisheries, wildlife habitat. The big one is our Snake River Stewardship Program that has just kind of launched, if you will, over the last couple of years, not quite a decade, some of the cultural resources out there, and then raptor protection, one of my favorites. And again, we may not be able to get to all of this stuff. But let's start with fisheries. Many of you know that the Hells Canyon complex, the Hells Canyon Dam, Brownlee and Oxbow dams, those were built finished in the late 1960s. Well, it was about that time that, and I don't know, I wasn't around back then, but I suspect that we started to realize that there are anadromous fish on the rivers, and we were blocking their passage both to and fro the ocean, if you will. And so it became a huge issue for all of us. We said, wait a minute, we just blocked a huge resource, these beautiful Chinook salmon and steelhead and other species from getting to the ocean or traveling back and forth to their spawning territory. So back in the early 1960s, Idaho Power said, okay, we've got to do something to mitigate this. We've got to start building hatcheries. So the very first hatchery that was built, actually, Idaho Power built in the entire country for this particular reason was our little Oxbow Dam. It was built in 1962. We started to capture live fish, of course. We have several traps along the river system, capturing adults, spawning them at the hatcheries, releasing the smolts when they're about a year old, and helping them through their journey to get to the ocean. So here are the other hatcheries, the Rapid River hatchery just outside the little town of Riggins, of course. The Niagara Springs, the largest of the four, it's down in the Buell area, right along the Snake River. That's our big steelhead hatchery. And then our Passamaquoddy hatchery right outside the little town of Chalice. So of course, they're very strategically placed in the river system. As the fish are migrating back, we can catch the adults, take them to the respective hatcheries, spawn them, raise their offspring, and then set them free when they're ready to head to the ocean. Now, I will say, again, being with the company for 30 some years, I've seen this really progress over the years, and with technology, and you can see some just in the photos, the technology has become very state of the art and very automated, which really enhances the survival rate and the growth of the fish at the hatcheries. Every year now, depending on, of course, on the brood stock or the adults that are being caught every year, we raise somewhere between 7 and 7.5 million little smolts, Chinook salmon and steelhead, to prepare them for their journey to the ocean. And of course, we're not the only people out there doing that. So we're just one of the many people that are contributing to the fish going back out into the rivers. Is it perfect? Of course not. Nobody's arguing that it is. But it is one of our ways of mitigating what the dams have done to the fish over the last, 100 years probably. So to get into specifics here, I think we all know the story, of course. Any dam on any river with anadromous fish, migrating fish, as the fish are being pulled into the turbines here for many years, and this is, of course, what started to disturb people in the 1950s and 60s. People started to realize those little smolts were being spun around the turbines and then being spit back out into the river, and they were very injured and, of course, dying out there in the river. So in place, of course, many things have been experimented with, some very successfully, some not so much. But one of the big ones is the smolt bypass system, where the screens are being put in place. And this is along the Columbia River and Lower Snake dams, of course. All of them have these bypass systems where the smolts, as they're being pulled in from the surface, they engage with this screen system right here, which will push them up into this area. I hope you're seeing my laser pointer. And we'll put them through this little tube and safely remove them from, or take them away from the turbines and safely put them back out into the river. Many of you know that there is a barging system in place on the Columbia as well. So there are times, especially in the springtime during the big migration, the smolts are actually captured in these barges and transported certain areas downstream. We don't want to take them clear to the ocean because they need to learn how to swim. Little smolts, a year old, they don't even really know how to swim very well. So we don't want to just throw them out into the ocean and have them fend for themselves. They need to become stronger swimmers. So as they're making this journey closer to the ocean, we start to release them and allow them to practice their swimming skills. Many of you probably know that's a couple of the dams, Ice Harbor being one of them on the lower Snake, have weir systems in place. It decreases the heavy flow down the spillways. And so some of the smolts, millions of them, that don't have to go through the bypass system, they can avoid that and go right down the spillways. It's a less of a rough ride, if you will. So many of them are surviving that way. Again, nobody is arguing that this is a perfect system, that it's saving every little anadromous fish to get to the ocean, but it's definitely better than the alternative with nothing out there to help the fish. One of the things that we're seeing, and we are actually installing on some of our facilities, are the fish-friendly turbines. We're starting to see this globally, of course, as well. But here in the Pacific Northwest, whenever a turbine needs to be replaced, it's replaced with a very fish-friendly turbine. Of course, the curvature of the blades so that the fish aren't slammed around so much, and it helps them get through the turbines a lot easier. And then finally, the final step, how do the adults get through the dams or over the dams? Well, we know it's the fish ladder system. And these are very successful as well. Not perfect, but it does allow, if you look at the ladders there, they're actually a simulated waterfall, because we know the adult fish, when they're coming back upstream, and it takes them 6 to 8 months to get back up because they're fighting the current, but they're also jumping over lots of waterfalls. So their instincts tell them to just climb the ladders, get back out or their journey. All right, well, one of my favorite programs that probably doesn't get quite as much fanfare is our white sturgeon program. Now, white sturgeon, we all know, is a very endangered species, huge fish. They are still considered prehistoric. They're very, very large. We actually have fisheries biologists at Idaho Power that are dedicated to sturgeon conservation. And you can see there, these are little baby fish. This one's about a year old. This one, our fisheries biologist told me that this one is about 60 years old. But here's what is happening on our part of the river system, the Snake River part. So we have a fairly decent population of sturgeon in the CJ Strike and Bliss and Shoshone Falls area, kind of back and forth in there. But it's also a big spawning ground for them too. Now, the problem is we have put several dams in their way. And so they don't, obviously they don't migrate hundreds of miles, but they do like to move back and forth to spawn and raise their young. But we've put a couple of big obstacles in their way. The other big area where we see a lot of sturgeon is down below Hell's Canyon in that reach down there. So what Idaho Power has done for many years between Shoshone Falls and Hell's Canyon, we have been capturing, as you saw from that last photograph, we capture sturgeon, we tag them, we x-ray them, because of course, many of them are carrying a lot of fishing equipment because they do bite off a lot of hooks and they get a lot of sinkers and hooks in their bodies that can contaminate them, unfortunately. But here's the fun part. We, for many years, have been taking DNA samples. The benefit of the DNA samples is that as we're moving the fish from their non-spawning territory up to their spawning territory, releasing them and then letting them come back after they spawn, what is happening is that we've been doing this for so long with DNA sampling that we're now seeing evidence of 2 and almost 3 different generations of sturgeon. So what my point is this, the program is growing because the fish are starting to reproduce and starting to repopulate. Certainly at a very slow pace, there's no doubt about it, but it is starting to see some major improvements. Now, here's what I'm really proud of. This last year, at the end of 2021, we opened the doors to our sturgeon hatchery down at Niagara Springs. I'm very proud of this because, again, this doesn't get a lot of fanfare. Not a lot of people are even aware of this, but this little structure right here is our new sturgeon hatchery. We've been working with the College of Southern Idaho, Idaho Fish and Game, of course, and our sturgeon hatchery just opened its doors. And the goal, of course, the short-term goal with the white sturgeon is to raise about 2,500 each year to release back into the river at certain parts, certain reaches where that we know their survival rate is strong. That would be Shoshone Falls, Bliss, CJ Strike, and Hell's Canyon. So very pleased to announce to everybody that our sturgeon hatchery is finally open, it's operating, and we're just so excited to start raising some baby sturgeon. The other small project that just completed this last year was the Upper Malad River Trout Ladder. Many of you are aware, rainbow trout migrating back and forth. One of the great things about the Malad River is it's a really good spawning ground for rainbow trout. Unfortunately, we put a dam in their way. So for many years, we've been planning this ladder for the rainbow trout to get upstream. It's probably about a 5-mile stretch upstream, if I remember correctly. So as you can see from the photographs there, we built this, we retrofitted a ladder right there on the dam. So as the fish come upstream, right in this area, there's a little gate right there. They just come right into the gate and climb the ladder, get up into the reservoir and travel about 4 or 5 miles upstream. When they are finished spawning, they come right back down the spillway flow and we're back in business. So again, these may seem like small steps, baby steps. Maybe we should have thought about this many years ago, but these, of course, things take time, they take money, they take resources, but these are just things that are happening out there on the river that we're very proud of. Speaking of that, let's kind of transition a little bit to some of the what's happening along the riparian areas around the Snake River itself. Wildlife habitat, we all know that for years with the meandering of the river, with the, of course, with the construction of the dams and the flooding of certain areas, it has had a pretty big impact on wildlife habitat, especially for migrating herds of deer and elk, antelope, and things like that. So Idaho Power has acquired over 30,000 acres of property, mostly in the Hells Canyon area, but also down in the Hageman area as well. And we have built food plots, and we have created lots of food for these migrating herds. We've also done some really great work along the streams. Again, some of the streams and tributaries leading to the Snake River, you can see hopefully from the photograph right there. We have vegetation management folks that go out and replant vegetation along the stream beds there, along the shoreline, to, of course, prevent erosion, to decrease the solar load on the water, to drop the temperature of the water, make it a little cooler, and of course, to clean the water as well. And of course, as you can imagine, it creates a very aesthetic look as well. So we have tons of people out here coming from all over the world that recreate here in Idaho. And so that when they see things like this, hopefully it's a pleasant experience for them. So lots of work going on just in terms of wildlife habitat, food plots, riparian repair, if you will, erosion repair, that sort of thing. A couple of cute photos for you to share. Up in our Daly Creek area, which is over near Hells Canyon, we set up a water trough for the wildlife and then set up a little game camera. So we've been able to observe some fun stuff as some of the herds and some of the small animals are coming in and out. We've seen everything from mountain lions to, deer and elk and things like that. We captured a couple of shots of these pronghorn recently. And then earlier in the year, this is our corporate communications folks caught these, and they said that we could probably call these selkies, if you will. I know that's a very bad pun, but this little herd of elk came up to the camera, and one female in particular decided she was ready for her close-up, and so she just posed for the camera there. But then she got a little more curious and got a little too close. She didn't do any damage to the camera, but she was very curious as to what that camera was all about. So some fun stuff that we actually get to set up with, again, with technology. We get to set these things up and get to enjoy what is actually happening out there with the restoration of the habitat for these herds of deer and elk. Well, let's get to the Snake River Stewardship Program itself, because this is sort of the heart of everything, because it's the heart of our company. There's no doubt about it. So just as the overview, so obviously Idaho Power is very committed to the conservation of the Snake River, of its tributaries. We want to make sure that we're providing clean water or using clean water, making sure that we are good stewards out there. So a couple of things, that a project that was completed early 2016, and I give you that date because something happened in that year. Many of you are aware, but I'll just tell you the story of Beha Island. Beha Island was the very first project that was chosen in the Snake River Stewardship Program. And you can see there from the island, this was an area that was identified. It's down there in the Walters Ferry area between Murphy and Marsing. It's right in the Marsing Reach there. This was an island where, unfortunately, the water was it had slowed down. The floodplain had kind of spread out a little bit. So the water was very warm. It was muddy, and a lot of weeds, a lot of algae started to grow in that area. So Idaho Power said, let's take this on as our pilot project for the stewardship program. So what did we decide to do? I apologize, these little drawings here, these little sketches may not really be as clear to you as they are to me, but here's what happened. We built a coffer dam right here to block the flow of the water. And this blue area right here, we actually dug out the channel to make it narrower and to make it deeper. So the water would flow faster, the water would cool down, and it would also decrease the sediment and the mud that would lay at the bottom of the river. While we were doing that, we were backfilling the island right here. This orange and red area right here shows you where we backfilled the island. Now, the really good news, a couple of really good things happened, of course. As we were excavating this area right here, we were taking tens of thousands of yards of material to use to backfill the island right here. And then another thing happened. Let me show you some of the excavation. There it is right there. There's some real life photos for you of the excavation that was going on. But we had a local landowner who we spoke to, because we noticed that he had a huge gravel area that he had used for other jobs. And we contracted with him to use a lot of that gravel to bring into the island and backfill that area, which of course benefited in many ways. The materials were right there, but it also kept Idaho Power from having huge materials trucks and dump trucks on the highways out there. So it decreased the safety issue, the wear and tear on the trucks, the wear and tear on the roads, because the materials were right there at our disposal. So to show you what happened here, this is a really cool thing here to see. This red outline right here shows you what the island looked like before we got started. And then you can see all the backfill right here. So it may not seem like a really significant thing, but just backfilling, making the island a little bit bigger, and then deepening that channel so the water moves through faster, it has made incredible differences. The reason I mentioned the year 2016, I know you all know what happened in the winter of 2016. Snowmageddon happened in 2016. And so unfortunately, the island was inundated. The snowpack, the water, the flooding of the river, of course, ran right over the island. And so in the spring and summer of 2017, we were all kind of holding our breath to see if the snow and the snowpack and the flooding had done any damage to the island. Well, I'm very pleased to tell you that it did absolutely nothing. In fact, all the vegetation that was planted there was still in place. And of course, after the floodwater subsided a little bit, the island was still sound and things returned to normal. So we were very pleased to report that. So project number 2, well, there are many projects, but this is a big one. I'm so sorry, this has happened so recently. I don't even have any good photographs to show you, but we have a new project. Here was the Beha Island project that I just showed you. Well, right upstream, a little closer to Gibbons Hot Springs, is our new Rippey Island project. It's going to be very similar to what we did down at Beha Island. They just completed the coffer dam. It was kind of fun to watch. I watched a video just recently of the fisheries biologist who went down there and literally picked up by hand the fish that had been trapped in the coffer dam, and they were picking them up and moving them back to the main channel, just to, again, to save any species, any fish, anything that was out there being affected by our operations. Well, and then the final step is the agriculture scenario. One of the things that I was very proud of is our ag world. In fact, one of my best friends, it works for Idaho Power, but he's a farmer down in the Glens Ferry area. So he was heavily involved in this project right here. Many of our older farms, if you will, used flood irrigation method for many years, and some still do. Sadly, the flood irrigation method, it's very effective in terms of watering the crops. But as you know, when you open up the gates to the canal and all the water washes through the crops, it also takes with it a lot of sediment that takes a lot of fertilizers and pesticides, a lot of chemicals that eventually leach into the canal system that leach back into the river. Well, we thought we needed to do something about that. And in the Grandview area was where we chose to take on a project where we worked with the local farmers, helped them finance their new sprinkler systems, these huge wheel and pivot systems, so that they alleviate the sediment runoff. It's not perfect, of course, but as you can tell with this new sophisticated sprinkling system, the leaching and the runoff is decreased tenfold as opposed to flood irrigation. Well, I see that we're right at 12:30, and I told Maria and Louisa that I would stop for just a moment and maybe take a few questions from you. And if we have time, maybe we can move on to other things. But that was sort of the heart of where I wanted to go with what we're doing out there in terms of environmental stewardship, our Snake River Stewardship Program, and some of the projects that we have in place right now. So I'll pause for just a moment.
Russ, that was fantastic. I didn't know about a lot of those projects you were talking about. So that's great to see that Idaho Power is putting resources into those efforts to mitigate some of the impacts of the dam.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Maria. And you know, like I said, a lot of these projects don't get the media fanfare So a lot of people are not aware of all the things that Idaho Power. I mean, when people talk about environmental stewardship and the power companies, not just Idaho Power, they usually think of anadromous fish, and that's natural. I mean, that of course we're all very concerned about Chinook salmon, steelhead, sockeye, bull trout, the whole gamut. And it really got lifted to a higher profile this earlier last year when Congressman Simpson came out publicly and said, I think it's probably time for us to think about breaching the dam in the lower Snake River. That was a surprise to all of us because for many years, our congressional delegation has been fairly pro-hydro and have kind of shied away from broaching the subject of dam breaching. But he finally kind of crossed the threshold and started talking about it. So it has really elevated in.
Sorry, I lost you there for a second, Russ, but thanks for that explanation. That's a pretty interesting consequence of Simpson's proposal there to take to fish now have someone in the seat of power.
Yes,
bring that up. It definitely changes the equation.
it really does change the equation because we realize that if just one of those dams is breached or removed, whatever winds up happening, it does put a lot of pressure on people like companies like Idaho Power, because we have to ask how much longer will we be able to operate the way we do? How long will we keep Hell's Canyon? Because if we start coming upstream, the first one on the target on the list would be Hell's Canyon. And so obviously for years, many agencies, many organizations have asked Idaho Power to build a ladder on Hell's Canyon to allow Chinook salmon and steelhead to come back up farther and go at least to the Oxbow area. And of course, it's something that we consider all the time. But if you've ever seen Hell's Canyon and the very deep gorge that Hell's Canyon Dam is in, that ladder would literally have to stretch probably 10 miles downstream to just fit into that very narrow canyon. And of course, like everything else, it would take time, money, resources, and the whole gamut. Let me just, there was a really good question. Have the island projects resulted in lower water temperature in the river? Yes, absolutely. And I'm sorry, I couldn't give you actual temperature drops, but again, the Beha Island project completed in 2016, we're now starting to see some long-term results, some positive results of not only lower temperatures in that channel, but we're also starting to see less sediment. The river bottom isn't as muddy as it was before. And by the way, I should give a lot of credit to the Freshwater Trust as well, because they were huge collaborators and huge partners with Idaho Power in these projects. And so they've been going out periodically and testing the water and testing the temperatures and things like that. So a lot of kudos to the Freshwater Trust.
Thanks, Russ. Can you just quickly tell us which dams have ladders and which dams don't?
Yeah, so I will just say none of Idaho Power's dams have ladders except for now our new upper Malad Dam for the rainbow trout. So the dams that do have ladders are all four of the Columbia River dams from Bonneville to McNary, and then the lower Snake dams. That would be Ice Harbor, Lower Granite, Little Goose, and for some reason I just lost the fourth one. In other words, there are 8 federal dams on the lower Snake and Columbia that have fish ladders. They also have those bypass systems for the smolts, the little baby fish passing through.
Another question that came through is how are your projects on the islands prioritized?
Yeah, very good question. I wish I had the expertise of one of our environmental folks sitting right beside me here. I don't know how they actually prioritized it. I do know that they started with Beha Island because it was definitely a problem area. I mean, everybody agreed. I mean, everybody from Department of Water Resources, Idaho Power, the Freshwater Trust, everybody said, this is definitely a problem area. The water's way too hot. it's way too muddy. There's too much sediment in it. Let's start here. And then, of course, once we completed that one, we said, okay, let's move upstream. Let's just keep going with this thing. And so that's why we landed on Rippey Island, just right outside of Gibbons Hot Springs out there. Good question.
And we have several questions that look like they have long answers. So I'm just going to squeeze in my own question first, so hopefully you can answer quickly. We talked a little bit about this before the presentation, but can you talk about how the summer demand for electricity for residential and commercial, how that integrates with the summer demand for water from agriculture?
Yeah, we were talking about this before everybody signed on, Maria and Louisa and I. We here in Southern Idaho, of course, we are a summer peaking region. There's no doubt about it. With between air conditioning and agriculture, those big pivot systems that we were talking about, creates a huge load on Idaho Power system. And so we peak heavily in the summertime. And I can assure you this last summer with weeks and weeks of triple digits, we were we were just right at the peak of our capacity. In fact, our energy traders were very busy during those weeks purchasing energy out on the wholesale market. But to your question, Maria, yeah, so here's the good news, the silver lining. Even though here in the southern part of Idaho, we're a summer peaking region, up in the Pacific Northwest, Portland, Seattle, although they would probably argue differently after their last summer, they are a winter peaking region. And so one of the benefits of this wholesale market, the buying and selling of energy, is that we can buy and sell energy during our peak times. In other words, during the summer peak of Idaho, we purchase energy from them. And then in the winter peak, they purchase energy from us. And by the way, let me just emphasize, it's all clean energy. Nobody's selling coal or natural gas. We're selling hydropower, wind, and of course, even nuclear power is being purchased along the way. But back to your question, Maria, yes, it is a delicate balance here. And one of the struggles that we had this last year, as we know, the irrigation districts were shutting off canals because they were trying to divert as much water as they could back to the river so we could produce hydropower, but also so the farmers could finish their growing season. I mean, we tried to divert as much water to our ag folks as possible. That's why, and I'm sure I'm not the only one in the crowd here, my water in my sprinkler system here in my home, it got shut off a month earlier than it normally does. I think we all suffered through that because there was just not a lot of water to share. And so when it comes down to years like that, and let's hope it doesn't happen again here in the unforeseen future, but we do have to go through a priority list. I mean, who's the most important in terms of getting the water? Is it the power company, the ag folks, the growers, you and me watering our lawns? Who actually shares the water and who has the rights to the water? And from time to time, for better or worse, there is sometimes court action taken. People don't think that they are getting their share, and so they'll take somebody to court and fight over the water rights. And so that has to be argued, it has to be litigated.
Hey, Maria, I have a question for Russ.
Sure.
Is Idaho Power looking at incentives for agrivoltaics, which are raised solar panels over farmland that allow farm equipment to move underneath, or solar panels over large parking lots? For those that don't know, agrivoltaics shows promise for preserving small farms, which is a priority, I know, in Canyon County, as well as reducing water demand and heat stress, and thereby improving yields on at least some crops. And it seems like solar panels over parking lots could both produce power and provide increased shaded parking, which everybody is searching for in the summer.
Such a great question. And the answer is yes. Although, so here's what Idaho Power's position. We are very much advocates and even proponents of electrification of a lot of different fleets, whether it's agriculture, the trucking business, whatever it might be. We are trying to encourage, in other words, we're trying to get folks to think about purchasing electric vehicles. I mean, everything from forklifts to pickup trucks, anything that they use, whether it's on the farm or out on the interstate. And so, and of course, Idaho Power we have collaborated with a lot of organizations to set up charging stations in parking lots in certain organizations. We've got several charging stations at a number of our offices across our territory. So the answer is yes, whatever is available out there, we are proponents of. Now, we may not necessarily be the big player in that, but we may be sort of a silent partner, if you will, or we may be sort of encouraging those things to happen. So yes, the answer is emphatically, we are definitely involved in those things. Somebody had a really great question about, I think John had a question about using dairy waste and energy projects related in the Magic Valley. And again, the answer is an emphatic yes. Idaho Power is purchasing biomass energy, and specifically it's the dairy waste down in the Jerome and Buell areas. There are 6 little biomass plants set up, and biomass is just the burning of the methane gas produced by cow manure, as we all know. So we have anaerobic digesters down there that are extracting the methane gas. They're burning it, creating steam, turning a turbine to turn a generator. So most definitely part of that, when you looked at that pie chart and it said other non-hydro renewables, well, that's biomass. I mean, it's right in the mix. It's a small percentage, but it is part of our integrated resource plan. We see biomass energy as an expanding science. And my goodness, if you go down to the Magic Valley and see all those dairy farmers, look at that right there. There's a resource available to us already. One of the things I'm hoping to do, if we can ever get out of this pandemic mess, is go tour some of those biomass facilities down in the Magic Valley. So yes, that is happening as well. I'm sorry, I'm trying to scroll through and get to questions as quickly as I can.
There was a question snuck in there about Russ, the closure of the Boardman coal plant,
Yes,
and whether that means that the Boardman to Hemingway line is still in the works. Is that on, off? How does
It
that
is.
impact that?
It is on, and such a great question. When you hear Boardman, you think, okay, well, you close the power plant. Does that mean the transmission line is shut down? Let me just back up a step. For those of you who are not aware, Idaho Power, working with Bonneville Power and a couple of other organizations, are in the planning process of building a 500-mile stretch of transmission line between the Boardman substation and our Hemingway substation down in the Owyhee County. A huge transmission complex that will help us import and export more power, just gives us more capacity. So the answer is yes, it is still in the planning process. The closure of the Boardman plant has nothing to do with the transmission line. It just happens coincidentally that it's called the Boardman to Hemingway project. We're still in the planning project. I believe the last time I heard, we hope to be in construction of that project here in the next couple of years. They still think they hope to have it completed by 2026. But again, everything is fluid, everything changes with a lot of different circumstances. But yes, that transmission complex is still in that planning process. Excellent question.
Well, thank you, Russ. It looks like we have pretty much answered everyone's questions. And I'd like to really thank you for your presentation today. I know I learned a lot, and Idaho Power is certainly busy doing a lot of things that are consequential to their power generation, but isn't just the straight nuts and bolts of here's a power plan, here's our power lines. And you think, man, how much could we have avoided today if we had thought of these things when the plants were built? But it was a different time and we didn't. So here we are doing what we can to help mitigate the impacts of those.
I totally agree, Maria, and thank you. I totally agree with the fact that, in 1916, was anyone concerned with anadromous fish? Probably not. They probably didn't even know what Chinook salmon and steelhead really were, or how building dams would impact them, or if they did, sadly didn't pay them the mind that they should have, unfortunately. So yeah, it was a different time, different mindset, And of course, we're doing our very best to mitigate some of the decisions that were made in the past. And I think we've had some real successes out there. And I'm really looking forward to moving forward with this clean energy goal by 2045. It's very exciting to see some of the strides that are being made, not just by Idaho Power, but the industry as a whole.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. We're going to jump now to back to I'm sorry, I got lost there. But thank you, Russ. We really appreciate you putting that presentation together and helping us to understand everything that's going on at Idaho Power and your mitigation efforts.
It was my pleasure. Thank you all very much for your time. I do appreciate it. Good to be with you today.
Thanks, Russ. And
Bye-bye.
thank you to everyone who participated today. We had great questions and all sorts of great information about what's going on out there. Like Russ mentioned several times, maybe under the radar, but Idaho Power is trying to mitigate some of the, there's significant impacts from the dams. And so it takes significant mitigation efforts, and those don't happen overnight. So it's nice to see that Idaho Power continues to explore options and undertake projects that help the rivers. I'll give a shout out right now for Steve Hubble in the city of Boise, who is making a presentation on January 19th, same time, 11:45. I hope that you can all sign up for that and attend that as well. That will start at 11:45. And I forgot to mention earlier that we have a title sponsor this year, that is Kennedy Wilson. So I want to give Kennedy Wilson a shout out as a title sponsor. They make a lot of these presentations possible. And that's our presentation for today. I encourage you to go visit our website, boiseriverinhancement.org. Become a member, we have all of our brown bags videos posted on our website. This one should be up within a couple days. And there's all sorts of information on there, information on our projects, blogs, photos of our projects, all sorts of stuff. So give our website a look, and please feel free to contact us anytime at info@boiseriverinhancement.org. If you think of any questions for Russ that come into your head in the next couple of days, please feel free to contact us, and we'll forward those on to Russ and try and get answers for you. So thanks, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.